When you're rolling off a flat rate, the feature parity is going to be the one Enterprise Edition, which is the middle tier. It's a lot more expensive, but it also gives you pretty good parity, but you may not need all that. This is in Google Cloud Docs that tell you, it's got a nice little chart showing what each edition, as well as on demand, the features. And note, if you looked at this a month ago, it's changed pretty significantly after Google Next. They moved quite a few new features in there and they pushed things around a little bit. Generally, Enterprise Edition is what 99.9% of customers are going to need. I mean, to be honest, I've worked with a couple hundred customers. I think I've seen one or two of them actually need Enterprise Plus. And that was mostly because they were either doing some really insane regulatory, like defense contract or government contract work, or just some very heavily regulated financial industry stuff. And that was all came down to that they needed to provide their own encryption keys, which is a very rare case. Most customers will let Google handle encryption keys. So chances are you're going to need the Enterprise Edition. With that said, if you've got some workloads that aren't slot heavy, you're not doing anything more than just basic querying, you're not doing any crazy number crunching, you don't need 10,000 slots or anything like that, Standard Edition is about, I think it's 20% cheaper roughly, and it might be a good middle ground for you. But one thing I want to point out is the max reservation size of 60. That is the maximum it allows per reservation. So they cap you at that. But if you don't need 1,600 slots, you can below it, Standard Edition might be a good way to go for that. Assuming you don't need anything like service controls, being able to control row or column access or anything like that, Standard Edition is perfectly good for most workloads. I know Google's not going to recommend that. They're going to push the Enterprise Edition, but we see a ton of customers that go and use Standard Edition that are just fine. And they have like basic queries that maybe are doing some BI tools or doing some number crunching. And they say it takes them about another 2-3 minutes for a lot of their queries to run for reports that are not mission critical. And they say, that's just fine. I'll pay 20% less, and they do that. So I would definitely consider that, is looking at Standard Edition versus Enterprise Edition, even though the feature parity is going to be different because Standard Edition is lacking a lot of the more quote unquote enterprisey features. But to be honest, most customers we see really don't do a lot of this stuff, such as VPC service controls or the column and row level security and access. That's a big one that I see a lot. One of the few that are used quite often. BI Engine, which we'll cover in some more questions later, but if you need BI Engine, unfortunately, you have to use On Demand or Enterprise Edition. Materialized views is one of the other ones. If you're doing a lot of refreshing of materialized views, you may need Enterprise Edition, or you may choose a separate project to refresh all your materialized views that use Enterprise Edition and query them with Standard Edition. That's something I've seen some customers use. BigQML is one. Sometimes we see it a lot of times. Customers will look at BigQML, think it's amazing. They'll end up not using it. They'll go to Vertex AI or something different. So just something to keep in mind.
I'm surprised. Like I keep scrolling and it finally ended here. So
yeah, there's a lot on here. I'm just calling out the big ones we've seen.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, most of these are not going to ever come into play on you unless you're doing something very specific. But to be honest, we've only run to a handful of cases where customers will say, oh, I need Enterprise Edition over Standard Edition for this reason. It's not the 1,600 slot.
We covered this in a podcast that we recorded and we published about a week ago. Matt and Sale were our guests. And I think, if I remember correctly, the high-level general rule of thumb for choosing the right pricing plan is that editions, if it's stable usage throughout the day, and for things that are ad hoc or unstable, put that on demand. Did I get that right?
Yep. Yeah. If it's spiky workload, editions is probably going to cost you more money because of some of the nuances with it. And we covered that in there. There's a ton of little ones on there that are documented and hard to find. But if you have a spiky workload, editions is probably not a good fit for you. On demand is probably better. Of course, you then have to look at how much data you're processing and your costs at that level.